Richard Bonham, it is an absolute privilege, honor, pleasure from my perspective to talk to you because there's so many people in my circles that have swung in your circles, and I have done my research on you like you've done your research on me. And there's not a single person that I've spoken to that could not say more great things about you. So I'm honored.
Oh. Well, thank you very much. Great compliment. And likewise, I've been following you for a while now. And yeah, I think you play a really important role in what we all do, I guess.
Well, I appreciate that. I will champion one individual that I know you will champion too, Belton McMurray, young little Texan, and not little, so much little anymore. But I took him to the Northern Territory on his first, like, I don't know if you can call it camera gig, and just such a champion of a man, hey?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with him here. A great guy we filmed, and a great guy to be with. And yeah, and we had fun at the same time, so it was good.
Well, Richard Bonham, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast. Why don't we just start by who you are, what you do, where you live, all of those good things.
Okay, so where to begin? So I live in the Amboseli ecosystem. That's below Kilimanjaro on the Kenya side, in between Sabo and Amboseli in the Chulu Hills. I've been living here for close to 40 years now. I came here as a sort of tour operator, and then within a few years, I saw the need to, make some big interventions on the conservation side, because this area is owned by the Maasai. It's all communal land. And I saw unless we started involving them in conservation that, this land would be lost. So can say now nearly 35 years I've been almost full-time, and the last 20 full-time just doing conservation. I co-founded with a photographer, Nick Brandt, a thing called Big Life Foundation. And yeah, we've grown a lot. Today let me start. We started by employing 5 game rangers. That was back in the 90s. And that was the first thing we did. And now we're up to, I think, 370 rangers over
Wow.
1.5 million acres.
Wow.
When we started it was nearly all anti-poaching. But now I reckon 2/3 of our team are more involved in, mitigating human-wildlife conflict, helping the community crime, monitoring. And then on top of that, we realized that, if this area was going to survive, we had to involve the people who live here in conservation, because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're going to be the people who decide whether wildlife lives or dies on their land. So, we've got a lot of outreach, community projects. Education's one of our biggest. I think we've got over 500 kids on wildlife scholarships now in the area.
How long have you been doing the scholarship program?
From the beginning. We started that early on, back in the 90s.
Have you seen are people now involved that you've seen go all the way through the education system that now are touching back?
Just the other day I was at a function to open a school dormitory, which we built, and uninvited 2 people turned up. One was we put her through school. She became a doctor. She's now the head of the district county health system. And she turned up to just say to the school what education had done to us, and it was through wildlife. And then also with her was an accountant. He's now a fully fledged accountant. And again, he came to talk to the kids and, show them what education could do. And it was because of wildlife. And, that blew me away, the fact they came on their own. And so I
Isn't
think it
that
shows
like the
like,
ultimate? It's almost, I would
yeah,
see it as the ultimate, like this full circle moment. It's like, holy smokes,
exactly,
look at what we did.
exactly. And I think of all our programs, that's one of the most important because it gets into the grassroots. You know, you can build a dormitory, you can do that, but when you're taking kids into school, and you know, we try and target kids who can't, you know, make it to school or get kicked out, because of lack of paying of fees and this and that. So the families, everybody in that family, extended family, knows that old Joe is in school because of wildlife. So that's a really meaningful, impactful program. And then the other thing that has grown, probably the last 20 years, is the human wildlife conflict mitigation. You know, that is one of the biggest battles of our time right now. You know, the ecosystem shrinking, wildlife aren't able to move where they used to. So, you know, we, you know, permanently having call outs to push elephants out of farms, even other wildlife. You know, that resulted in us building a fence, 100-kilometer fence along the slopes of Kilimanjaro from the Tanzania border all the way down, a place called Kimana. And that's reduced it by conflict by 95%. The other big conflict we had was, we'll still have, is lion predators taking wildlife, taking livestock. Back in, it was in 202. I saw that the lions, which were plentiful when I first got here in the mid-80s, pretty much wiped out. And, you know, we tried to address the situation, you know, using conventional means, finding the guys who were spearing them, poisoning them. But that just didn't work. And the elders said, well, look, you know, we'll stop killing lion if you just replace the livestock they kill.
Yeah.
You know, rocket science.
Yeah.
So we created a compensation plan, and which today covers about 500,000 acres, I guess. And we've gone from, when we started, we did a survey, and we reckon we had between 15 and 25 lion in the whole ecosystem. And we've just hit the 250 mark.
Wow.
In fact, I think we're above carrying capacity.
Amazing.
Yeah, but it's also biting us in the ass because,
Of course.
you know, there's more and more
Of course,
livestock
more and
being
more
killed up.
livestock being killed.
Up.
So you still today are compensating for, how do you compensate? Do you buy a
Okay, so
piece of
what
livestock, or is
happens?
it cost value?
So what happens? You have your cow killed or your goat. In this day, everybody's got telephones, so it's easy. You know, we've got the radio room number. They call in.
Oh, the wonder of WhatsApp, huh?
Yeah, yeah. They're even a picture of the the carcass. And there we've got a unit of guys, 2 people, and they jump on a motorbike. They go to the area, and you know, it becomes a forensic scene. They have to see the tracks of the predator. They have to see the carcass, and there's different circumstances. You know, like if we'll only pay full value, we set a value with the community, so you don't argue over the value whether it's a calf or a bull. And then if it's, say, out at pasture and gets nobbled, full value. If it's lost, the herdsman loses it, which they do quite a lot, 50 cents of value. If it's taken from a boma corral at night, and the sort of the outer hedge is not up to a certain standard, half value. So, and then attached to that, and this is, I think, one of the important things, is we only pay every 2 months. And if any predator is killed in that zone within that 2-month period, it nullifies any claim.
Oh.
So people get peer pressure. Yeah, it's really worked well, and it's, you know, it covers everything from jackal all the way through to lion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Richard, what did you see 40 years ago that made you like say, shit, I need to do something?
You know, when I first got into this area, um, it was pristine. You know, there were no people here. There were you heard Lan calling every night, and you know, then I just saw the numbers going down, and being engaged in the community. If a Lan hunt was going on, I'd hear about it, or I'd be called. I don't know. I've probably flown out 10 guys that have been mauled by Lan when they've been hunting them.
So just
Now,
so for
two
context, when
guys
you
who actually got speared, they
oh
by
man,
mistake in the, you know.
when you
So you got to
started
give
40
those
years
guys.
ago, was it still hunting in Kenya?
No, it had closed by then.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it closed in 77. We're talking mid 80s. Yeah,
Wow, okay.
yeah.
So the wildlife you saw slowly decreasing, humans slowly increasing. You've witnessed it over the last 40 years. Essentially, things that I like to call it's like it used to be a sea of habitat with islands of humanity. Now it's almost a sea of humanity with islands of habitats,
Yeah,
right?
but true up to a point. It's the ecosystem is shrinking, no question. But having said that, and this is a crazy thing, they started doing wildlife counts here about 50 years ago. And you know, they've evolved, and it's now a biannual thing. And you look at the numbers, and it fluctuates. Like we had a drought last year, so 23 and 22, there were more animals in the Amboseli ecosystem than ever recorded. And
Because
that,
Amboseli had water.
I think they were safe. The
Okay.
poaching had gone right down. Bushmeat poaching pretty much under control here, thanks to all the rangers. And while I'm saying that, when all the rangers we have are from the community. They're all guys from within the area we operate. So that means that their families are involved as well. So you've got Ranger Fred living over there. He's got his family. If they hear anything going on, they call dad or uncle. And so we've got to, it creates a very strong informer network. So we've got that pretty much under control. So, why did it increase? Despite the fact the ecosystem shrinking, I think a lot of it is security for the wildlife. But the whole thing is that when I say fluctuations, we had in 2009, 2010, we had horrendous drought, biggest drought in the history of this area in living memory. And they reckon we lost 70% of the wildlife and same number of livestock too. So huge crash. But yet in 22, we were back up to record. And, it shows us if you give wildlife security, they'll bounce back on their own.
Richard, what do you think, in your opinion, is the biggest threat to wildlife in your area? It sounds like it's the vagaries of climate.
We've got the biggest battle on our hands now. It makes poaching and everything just seem, meaningless. It's all about habitat. Going forward, it's all about habitat. This area was originally divided into what we call group ranches. So each block was about 250,000, 300,000 acres, administered by a committee, and you might have anything from 1,000 to 4,000 members in that block. So they're in effect shareholders in that land. And that worked up to a point, had its strengths and failures, but in the last 4 years, that land is now being subdivided. So each member is getting his own plot within it. So going to individual ownership. So as soon as you've got that situation, it raises all sorts of challenges, I guess. People start putting up fences and, growing crops in places maybe they shouldn't be. But again, we've been very active with the community and helping planning this subdivision process, and it's gone really well. And one of the reasons it's gone well is, I think the people have seen benefits from wildlife, be it tourism, other revenue streams, employment, and so they bought in. They see the value. And on this group ranch where I'm living, 300,000 acres, they allocated 125,000 to pure conservation, then about another 150,000 to rangeland, where in that rangeland, there's attached a title. They're not allowed to fence, not allowed to drill for water, not allowed to build permanent houses. So that land is dedicated going forward to
wildlife.
pastoralism
Yeah,
and
yeah,
wildlife. So they're
yeah.
able to maintain their pastoralist lifestyle, and then at the same time live as Maasai have always lived. Everybody knows, cheek and jar with wildlife. And I think that's one of the big things I should have mentioned earlier, that the Maasai really do know how to live with wildlife. They don't eat wildlife.
Yep.
The only hunting they do is when they're young kids. They're allowed to go out and spear oryx and eland. And
Why
they have to
those
get permission.
specifically?
I don't know.
Huh.
I don't know. And they do that. They run them down with their dogs and go and spear them. And they're allowed to eat them at that point as kids. That's pre-circumcision.
Okay.
Once they're warriors, they're allowed to hunt lion or predators that hit their stock. And then the buffalo, considered a sport. They'd go out and just with their spears and hunt buffalo, allowed. And then occasionally, talking to elders when I first got here, who would have been guys, warriors, say in the 30s, I guess, they'd go out and they'd have a competition who could spear the most rhino in a day.
My God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one guy told me that his record was 4 with his
Jeez.
group.
Unbelievable.
Crazy.
Richard, it's funny you started talking about this almost community conservancy, communal conservancy kind of model around these ranches. I had a phenomenal podcast with Calvin Cotter, in which he was talking about those conservancies, and more of them are coming online in Kenya because of the value of wildlife. Are you seeing glimpses of that? You obviously just described it in your ranch. Are you seeing more interest in it, or is it just like an avo farm is going to pay us much more than a community conservancy, so we're just going to go that route?
Yeah, I think people really recognize it as a viable and revenue stream. They see it as a way to, make money out of the land, educate their kids, and also important role is maintain their pastoralism at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely. We're seeing more and more communities setting aside land, and the one I just described is a good example.
Richard, in the time that you've obviously been around, you've been there for 40 years, there's obviously been ebbs and flows in the elephant population as well. What does that look like? Give us a context to that. What does that look like over the last 40 years?
It hasn't moved that much in my time here. I know back in the 70s there were between 300 and 500 elephant in Amboseli. So using Amboseli as a base, you got to think of the ecosystem as Amboseli as the hub, because it's a big swamp. And elephant retreat into there in the dry season and then move out and when it's wet.
And the dry season in Kenya is when?
We've got 2. We've got one starting now, going through until, say now, May through until November, where we get rains. So that's a sort of 5-month period, no rain. And then we get rain November, December. and then we got a short dry season, January, February, March.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So the elephant population has consistently been about the same?
In the 70s, it was around 300 to 500, I think. We're looking at about 2,000, just under 2,000 now. So definitely grown. Yeah, it was, but again, nature has a way of controlling it. We had that drought last year, I said, and I think we lost about 300 elephant, mainly calves.
Mm.
That crop of calves under a year didn't make it, and then some real old ones went down.
And again, do you think it sounds like, because you had the 2022 drought, you had the 2009, 2010 drought that are knocking, probably, if we're talking 300, 400 elephants, you're knocking 20% of the population out.
Yeah. And this last one, whatever that works out to, it wouldn't be, no, it would be 10%.
Yeah, 10, 15%.
Yeah.
Which is, in terms of percentages of, elephants being lost to human wildlife conflict, elephants being lost to poaching, is, an order of magnitude higher. Or what would you say percentage wise you're losing of elephants in the anti-poaching, from a poaching human wildlife conflict perspective?
Well, you got to differentiate poaching and human wildlife conflict. We haven't lost an elephant here to poaching for 5 years. How many we lost in conflict? I can't tell you off the top of my head, but maybe 30, 40, something like that. 5 years.
Yeah.
And those are normally, it comes two ways. Elephant goes into a farm and then gets speared. Or an elephant kills somebody and then has to be put down. Which was justified.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. How much of that Amboseli 2000 do you think goes into Tanzania, spends time in Tanzania? Is it the majority of them? Is it half of them?
No. I've been reading up a bit about it, and it's probably when it's really wet and they disperse, you're looking at about 200, 300. And then the rest disperse other ways, because they can go South Tanzania, they go west, and then across to Chulu's, east, and then south. So, I'd say probably about 200 odd use that. And it's interesting because different families have different dispersals. That family always goes east, that one goes west, and that's known.
And the research also shows that it's and I think this is part of the controversy across the border, is that it's a well-known bull area.
Yeah, and definitely, and it's a proper bull area. They go in there, bulk up, and then they come back into Amboseli when they're musk, breed, and then go back. Whereas the cow-calf herds, they'll move more freely, just looking for pasture. They're in there now. There's a lot of ellies on the border going in now because it's so green.
Because of the good rains going into Tanzania.
Yeah.
What is from a big life perspective, are you guys just working only in the Amboseli area? Do you work outside? Do you work in Tanzania? What's your footprint like?
Yeah, we've been working in we call it Enduimet West Kilimanjaro since I think about 2010. Because there was bad poaching in that era, 2009, 2010. So we went in there and set up a ranger unit, vehicles, tracker dogs, basically replicating our operation over here. So we've been present there, for about 12 years now, I guess. Funding that ranger operation there, and also helping with the problem animal control, because they also have a lot of crop raiding, because it's all along the sides of Kili, very fertile.
Sure.
And that attracts ellies. especially when it's dry. And we all know they love the taste of a tomato or maize cob, and they'll risk their lives literally to go and get that. So we also have guys working on that. Yeah, so there's no point just looking after elephants on this side of the border and not on the other.
Yeah, 100%. And you're still doing that
And
today?
when I say elephants, all wildlife. Yeah.
Yeah, you're still doing that today?
Yeah, absolutely.
How many ranges do you have?
And then the other thing,
Go ahead, Richard.
that we do is, we've got quite a well-oiled informer intelligence network. I think the number is in 5 years. I wrote it down here. Yeah, since 2011. So 12 years, we've recovered 5 tons of ivory. Our intelligence unit. Not just here, obviously. We work further. That unit works.
Yeah, I saw a couple of your emails that went out that had like 129 kilos recovered.
Yeah, we've had
800 kilos recovered. I was like, holy smokes! Where do you think the ivory's coming from?
It's interesting. A lot was coming out of Tanzania to be marketed here. We made a lot of butts on the border coming this way. We've also made some butts on the border going that way.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it is picked up ivory. For instance, we've had a spike since the drought last year. We've got a spike, and you can see this is, it's pulled ivory. It's been lying around in the sun and stuff. But thankfully that poaching is still way down there, and the majority of the ivory recovering now is picked up.
How did the poaching crisis that happened in Tanzania and Kenya, when was that? I know in Tanzania, specifically southern Tanzania, it was in 2009, 2010, 2012 kind of scenario where they just got hammered. The same thing happened around you guys?
Even a bit later. Yeah. We were definitely part of that spike. And that was all price driven. The ivory at that point was going for, at its peak, about $200 a kilo to the poacher, first change of hands. Today, it's going for about $40.
Wow.
So, that's a, combination, many reasons. But, as long as that price can be kept low, there's no incentive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Richard, let me ask you probably the most controversial question of this podcast. Okay. Why do you think the hunting of these elephants on the Tanzanian side is so controversial?
There's a long list of reasons why they shouldn't be.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. And the first thing I want to say is I'm not anti-hunting. I see a role in hunting. I know there's millions of acres being protected by hunters. I was involved in the trade as a kid. So I see the value of it. But it's got to be done right. And everything about these ellies there is done wrong.
Okay.
So why do I say that? Okay, so you go back to 1966. There was a hunting company took over that area. Danny McCullum was, who's still around, was part of that company, and he told me that even back in 66, when they went in there, they said, we are not hunting elephant down that border, the Kenya border, because we know those elephant are mainly out of Amboseli Park. They're habituated. They're, it's violating every fair chase rule in the book by hunting them. Plus, they were very, very big. So there was one hunter on this side of the border who shot one, and he lost his license as a result of it. So since 66, those ellies were never hunted until the mid-70s. I think it was about, no, sorry, what am I talking about?
94.
95.
Yep.
Was it 95? Yeah.
94, 95. Yep.
Yeah. 4 big bulls were shot.
Yeah. 3 of them were collared.
I don't think they were collared, eh?
I think that
They weren't collared.
yeah, I think one
No,
of the okay.
I think they weren't collared. And that caused a huge ruckus. Even 60 Minutes came out here to do a report on it, and that resulted in a sort of cross-border agreement where Tanzania said they would stop hunting. Within some say 100 kilometers of the border, others say 50. We can't actually find any documentation. The only documentation we can find on it is a newspaper article out of a Tanzanian newspaper, which said an agreement had been reached to be a moratorium on any elephant hunting along the border. So that held until September last year. Different hunting companies have owned those blocks. And then another hunting company came in, and the first thing we heard through our informer network that an elephant had been shot. And we're now up to 5. Now, okay, so their legal permits were issued. Lots of reasons to question why they were issued, but they were. So the guys have a permit. So it took everybody by surprise, and that the whole thing has reached a stage now where it's become, every time I switch on my phone, I see somebody posting something about these elephants. The anti-hunting brigade component, call it what you like, they are all over it. And, it's just pulling hunting down. Here we are in an era where Britain is about to ban import of trophies. That's probably going to go into the EU. Same thing's happening in America. I gather New York State has got a bill they want to put through. And now this is just putting fuel on a fire. It's giving so many reasons why hunting should be banned. And so it's bringing hunting into such ill repute. I just don't understand why Tanzania allows it, why the hunters actually do it, because they're shooting themselves in the foot. They need every friend they can get, but yet they're doing something, so obviously wrong. Throw on top of that, these are habituated elephants. We put a collar on one Ellie, 100-pounder, who we know crosses the border. And he's been in that hunting zone for about 6 weeks now, I guess. And you see him walking along roads. You see him going past villages. He hardly deviates. So he's not frightened of people. And, I wouldn't mind betting every single one of those 5 elephants shot were like him. So I don't know, how people get their rocks off on shooting a habituated animal. And then there's been so much disinformation, like, the people on that side of the border, some amongst the hunting community, saying, oh, there's 2,000 elephants on Kilimanjaro. These aren't Kenyan elephant, they're Tanzanian elephant, they're coming up the mountain, which is rubbish. There's been science done on that. They reckon that in 97, they reckon there are only 200 elephants on Kilimanjaro. And I think there's a lot less now there. And then there's been 2 censuses, recently, one in 2013, one in 2018. And one was 200, one was 167 Ellies.
This is on Kilimanjaro?
No, this is in the hunting area.
In Enduimet?
Forget the Kilimanjaro Ellies. We don't really know.
Yeah, because isn't Kili like, I've never been there, so, and hopefully I get to see it. It's something we can talk about later. I am coming July 14th through the 24th. and I wanted to see it for ourselves and obviously tell a story there. And obviously love to shake your hand, by the way. But I've heard that Kilimanjaro there's lots of canopy, lots of trees,
Yeah, you
very
can't.
difficult to
The
survey, right?
only way you can count them is doing dung counts.
Okay.
If you believe that can be vaguely accurate.
No.
Um,
So you said there were 200 Ellies in the later census of Enduimet, that area?
of Enduimet. So they reckon the last census of Kili was 200, which is a separate population. And then Enduimet, again, 160, 200.
How much do
those
you, in your experience, excuse me, how much do you think there's a lot of movement and migration and movement between that Enduimet area in terms of elephants?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said earlier, when it's wet, a lot move out. Maybe 200, 300 maybe, I don't know. But probably don't go that far into Tanzania. And then you get a lot of bulls who move further in to West Kilimanjaro, going up to Mount Meru. And they sort of hang out there probably most of the year. And then come back into Amboseli, either in a really bad drought or to mate.
Have you seen some of the elephant collaring work from Tawiri on elephants moving from Tarangire all the way up to Enduimet and actually up into Kenya, and the way that they move around Enduimet and
I haven't seen that
Kili
data.
and whatnot? Holy smokes, it's unbelievable.
I haven't seen that Tanzanian data.
Shit, it's amazing. Like, I looked at it and was like, wow.
Can you send it to me?
I'll send you pictures.
Have you got it?
I'll send you pictures. But it's like, it shows you. And here's, I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Igno.
Yeah.
Similar vein podcasting. And what he said to me resonated with me. He said, coexistence is costly.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And obviously they're a community trying to drive revenue for the betterment of their lives and whatnot's livelihoods. And they've only got certain mechanisms in which to do it. Ecotourism, one of them, cultural tourism, another. He said he has an investment block in there for people to come and invest in. And obviously hunting being another way to generate revenue.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the data of collaring activity, and it's not a phenomenal amount of collar work. There's like 7 bulls, 5 herds in the northern block. Then there's again, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but I'll get them to you. 5 elephants and 3 herds maybe in the southern block that move. But the Enduimet area just is like this core of like elephants moving into Kili, moving up into Kenya around Amboseli. It was very interesting that they moved like literally like a pincer movement around. Obviously there's some swamps, I think, on the west side of Amboseli. Am I?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was just super interesting, and it really resonated when Igno said to me, "Is like coexistence is costing." I was like, "Well, shit! If you've got all these elephants running around, it's the value chain, like you just described, right? From a compensation of predation perspective on the Kenyan border."
Yeah. I've lost you.
No, I'm here. To me, it was just in my brain. I was like, talking about being controversial.
I step
back.
I was saying we invest so much into that coexistence and mitigating conflict. People die every year. People lose crops. So it's a very costly business.
So again, maybe this is the second controversial question, but I want to ask you specifically because I value your opinion on it. If the people of Enduimet were like, yes, we want to hunt elephants, how do we address that?
Okay, well, the first thing that came up when this happened, I contacted Igno and said, hey, what's going on? Igno, everybody who's listening, is the boss of the wildlife management area. They're the manager.
Yep.
And he said, we were never told. We get the quota from Dar es Salaam. They set the quotas, and then suddenly an elephant gets shot here. So they weren't actually brought into the process and asked, do you want elephant shot or not? Of course, they're going to be interested because they get trophy fees.
Yep.
They get 45% of the trophy fee, which I think when it comes to elephant, they're probably getting about $10,000 for an ellie. So, I don't have a problem if an elephant is shot in the right area, or more importantly, put the right elephant.
Mm-hmm.
But here we have, in this case, I don't know the weights. I know two weights, and they were both over 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard rumors the other three at least had one tusk over 100 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
which means they're big elephant. We know the one we collared was 34 years old. He was a 100-pounder. We don't have 100% proof that
That's a sow, right?
it's our, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly the IDs of the other ellie shot. The hunters refuse to share any pictures or information so they can be cross-checked to see if indeed they are a Kenyan bull. Haven't seen any jawbones. So we don't know what's going on. But what worries me is I can see that whole population strata, that age group, being taken out now. The days of Enduimet being able to grow a super tusker, which we're on the edge of. We got these big ellies, they've been kept safe for 50 years, 40 years. And so these are now growing into big boys, as you're showing here. We've got 10 super tuskers here, 120s. We had one that was 160. We lost another one, 145. So now that whole crop that could have been huge money earners for Enduimet is now gone. They're going to have to wait another, 20 years to get a big tusker back in there. So yeah, that's another grouse I've got of, why it's so wrong.
It really goes beyond the 10 super tuskers you have right now. It's thinking in over the next 10 to 15 years, the elephants that are in the 30 to 35-year-old age range, the potential of them becoming revenue generators for ecotourism in that area.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. And, also they're coming into their reproductive prime.
Yep.
And, they're the genes that we want to carry on.
Mm-hmm.
Those big tuskers, we want to see them doing most of the breeding. So, yeah, it's a combination of all sorts of different things.
Richard, how do we straddle the balance of, because when I look at the science of the great stuff that Cynthia's been doing and Joyce has been putting out, in which they say less than 10% of the animals are going to actually reach that 50 age class, that 50-year-old age class, right? That's the Craigs of the world, the Tims of the world, the Wontons of the world.
Yeah.
How do we
balance? You know them all, eh? You've been doing your homework.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because I need to, right? I need to be able to speak fact. And, when I looked at, I've got a set of slides that I'm happy to share with you that we will post about Gilgil. And here's where I'll be honest with you. In the Gilgil argument, there's two arguments to Gilgil. Number one, iconicness, and two, he was too young. I question the iconicness of it because there's very few elephants pictures of Gilgil out there. And in my brain, an iconic elephant is one that's super well known, like Craig, like a one-ton. Then I look at, I haven't seen the skin and wrinkle analysis that Joyce and the team did, but I've noticed some things that, I've seen a 2018 picture of Gilgil, and this elephant that got shot, the first elephant, had a toenail structure that was super unique, super long toenails. In the 2018 photo that I have,
well, the one Gilgil had unique toenails, or the elephant was shot.
I don't know.
Oh.
And that's, again, this is sort of part of like the
the
research process I have.
This argument, could go on forever. I don't understand why the hunters, they've got pictures of that elephant alive, and dead, obviously, as with all 5. If they're not trying to hide something, why don't they just say, okay, this yelly we shot, who is he? Is it Gilgil? Let's put that to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can only think that they think he's Gilgil and they don't want to get it out in the open, make it official. So the link between Amboseli and Enduimet and the breeding bull is going to be there. And again, he falls into that age group where he would have been a super tusker, at that age, and he had 100, I think his weights were 107, yeah? What would he be in 10, 15 years' time?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a wood on both sides, right? What could he have been in 10 years' time? And when you think, again, I'm going to think a little crassly for a second.
Yeah.
What would, from a hunter's perspective, would you have preferred to have a bull of Gilgil at 45? Of course, right?
Yeah.
But on opposite, based on the science and the data, the chances of him getting to 45, I don't know. We don't know. Like, we don't know,
I think,
right?
Yeah, I think that high mortality, coming by that 10% number, happens when they're younger. Um, with the big ellies that I've seen here, most of them, have grown. I've known them for 15, 20 years, and there's not many I can say have died for whatever reason. We lost Tolstoy, he got speared going into a tomato farm. And then we lost another one. I forget his name now, but yeah, he killed somebody.
Yeah.
And had to be gone.
Richard, can I just pause you for a second? I've got someone at my door and my wife is gone exercising and the dogs are going crazy. I'll be back in 2 seconds, okay? Hold on 2 seconds.
Yeah. Apana.
All right, I'm back.
I'll call you back.
What happens when you're at home, working at home, and the insect guy comes and the dogs are going crazy? There's so many angles to this, man, and it's so convoluted and so complicated. Even to the nth, not the nth, but the highest level, which is 2 different countries doing 2 different things.
Yeah.
From a conservation of wildlife perspective.
Yeah. But but the other thing that makes me wonder, Tanzania's got 60,000 elephant, yeah? They've got a quota of 50 ellies, of which I think, normally it's 25, 30 are taken a year.
Yeah.
So it's not like, the quota's filled, get whatever ellie you can. The reason they've come here is to shoot big ellies. And the reason they're shooting big ellies is because they're making big cash. It comes down to that at the end of the day. So it brings the whole ethics of hunting into question. Do you shoot a 30-year-old bull because he's 100 pounds, or go and get a license in another area and shoot a 40-pound bull? And the answer is very clear for me, what should be done. Yeah,
I
so
wonder if
it
there's
comes
a,
down to that.
yeah, no, I wonder if there's a, you know, in my brain, I'm not an elephant hunter. I never will hunt an elephant. My grandfather was a big elephant hunter back in the day in Mozambique. I think most, and I won't say all, because there are exceptions to the rule, but I would say most people who hunt elephants want to hunt the oldest elephant, because
Yeah,
more often than not, the oldest elephant will carry the heaviest ivory.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's the holy grail. Yeah,
yeah, it is a holy grail. I think also from we talked about like photos of Gilgil and or any other elephants that are shot. I think, from my perspective, if I was that hunter or outfitter, I'd be worried about how they're used against us, right? How can we assure, and I don't know
yeah,
if this is a legal instrument or I don't know, how can someone like me, if I put myself in those shoes and I want to work with you, Richard, how do I send you all the information you want without it squashing me?
yeah. You know, I I've been talking to Paul Stones,
Mm,
and he's been telling me, you know, how they do this outside Kruger,
yeah, in the Timbavati.
and they've got a strict protocol. If those guys turned up with Gilgil, for instance, he would have a stonking great fine.
Hmm.
It would not be tolerated.
Hmm.
That elephant is so far off limits for a lot of different reasons.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
I wonder. I'll give you one of my thoughts that has come from doing a lot of research, doing a lot of picture searching. The crown jewel of elephant research is the Amboseli Elephant Research Project. It's
yeah,
been around for forever. The amount of data that the research project has specifically of older class elephants and elephants that known have died. In my brain, there is an opportunity for what you just said with Paul Stones and the protocol.
yeah,
That there's an opportunity from a photographic reference perspective, a photographic
yeah,
portfolio library perspective, as well as
yeah,
a jawbone perspective. Because
yeah,
to me, laws is the thing, right? Everyone uses laws to
yeah,
determine age of elephant once you pull the
yeah, yeah,
jawbone.
yeah,
But if you knew, there's nowhere else in the country, in the world, in which you actually know the birth date of a elephant, said elephant.
yeah, yeah,
And when it dies, you pull the jawbone. Laws says it's 39 to 43.
yeah,
We know it's X. Holy shit,
yeah,
you've got an opportunity to improve laws
yeah, yeah,
and also create this library of
yeah,
portfolio or protocols to
yeah,
say, guys, in this system, in Amboseli system, a 45-plus-year-old elephant has these characteristics. Boom,
yeah,
boom, boom,
yeah,
boom. But that only comes from having a database to be
yeah,
able to showcase that. And AERP has, I believe.
yeah, yeah. And you know, we're talking, and we want to build up a database, get photographs of all the Ellies in Enduimet, or as many as we can, cross-check them with the Amboseli Trust for Elephants, and see, okay, guys, who is this?
Correct.
Sorry, don't know him. That's
Right.
Fred.
Right.
Okay, and then that'll put to bed a lot of this argument.
Yep.
Um, as would help if photographs were sent to the elephant shot. We'd
Yep.
be able to say, okay, it's proof. This is the reason. We tried to get a team in there, um, not one of our teams, Tanzanian team, come in and just say, photograph every elephant. The WMA said, great, yeah, we'd like this. Next thing is, as the guy was arriving, permission denied. All right. So who turned that around? You know, so we've gone back downhill again now. Instead of coming together and saying, let's get an ID process, get a database, we'll know. So it's swimming against the current a bit.
You think the denial was the maybe being afraid of like every single elephant's going to be named?
it doesn't matter if they're named or not, but what would what it would tell us is who these ellies are. You know, who are they? Are they Enduimet elephant? We know they're not Kilimanjaro elephant. Are they Arusha elephant? There's quite a lot of movement from Arusha National Park.
Yeah.
Which is pretty tenuous actually. Something needs to be done about that corridor, bringing them down, because that's closing up fast. So it'd be really good to know. You know, you mentioned your that data you saw of collared animals, Tarangire moving through. You know, that will tell us so much about what's going on there, and be able to say, okay, keep off this guy, keep off that guy you can have for whatever reason. You know, interestingly, Tarangire has got some big bulls there. They've got quite a few 100+ pounders. And the hunting companies that I've spoken to around it have all said, we're not hunting these ellies. They're park elephant.
100%.
We're going to hunt them.
So, Richard, is that the compromise in your brain? I'll open up the table to you. What is the solution here? Is there a solution?
I think there should be a moratorium imposed immediately. An inventory, a census done. You know, from what I can see from numbers, they shot 5 bulls in a population of 200. Yeah.
Okay.
Resident. And then decide, okay, and who are they? Who are these animals? You know, are they 50-year-olds on their last legs? Is it a 30-year-old, or this guy's pushing 50, 45, 50 pounds? Yeah, take him. You know, it's got to be done properly. It's, you know, a bit of science has got to come in here. People have got to be honest. You know, put forward what they can in terms of evidence, analyze it, and say, okay, can this area take any more?
Do you think that, and again, I'm speaking, I think, thinking and looking at it from a hunting community perspective, the inventory of elephants in Enduimet, do you think the AERP side, and I don't know anyone there, I'd love to talk to Joyce.
Yeah.
Do you think that they would be honest and they say if an elephant, it looks like a big elephant photographed, and they're like, we can't identify this elephant, they would say, we don't know who this elephant is?
Well, if they do identify, they've got to say why. They've got to say, this is Fred, because you see that tear on his right ear, you see this wrinkle pattern here. They have to back up with evidence of how they identified it.
Agreed. No, and I think that's appropriate. I think the science and the research and the analysis to say X equals X, A equals A, totally appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, I know I've taken up a lot of your time of your day already, and I know you're a busy man, and your phone has probably been going crazy. Like, you're talking to this guy. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been an honor, and you know, I hope you understand the situation a bit better.
100%. Yeah, and we need to talk to everyone, and I think everyone needs to. I think cooler heads need to prevail, and I think everyone sitting around a table, saying, "Okay, let's all hear from each other with no reservations."
Yeah.
What are your beliefs in purpose, your beliefs in purpose, your beliefs in purpose, your beliefs in purpose. And at the end of the day, as we all know, if both sides feel like they've been beaten up a little bit and hurt a little bit in terms of the solution that's come forward, that's probably the best solution.
Yeah. And the other thing, just before we finish, I was speaking to somebody in the Tanzanian Association of Tour Operators. He called me to ask what was going on. And he said that, there's been an absolute uproar in his world, where travel agents and clients calling companies operating through say, what the heck's going on here? and wanting to know, and that they've gone to the ministry to say, what is the outcome? Is this going to be ongoing? And it's just silence. As it seems to be silence from the Kenyan government to Tanzania, where there's stuff going on behind the scenes, but certainly nothing that's been made public.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's one of the problems we're facing. Everybody is not opening their mouths about it.
Yeah. We also live in a very political world, unfortunately, and a
Yeah,
world that anything that whenever somebody does open their mouth, regardless
yeah,
of whatever side of the equations you are, gets taken out
yeah,
of context, gets splashed on
yeah,
newspapers and
yeah,
social media and whatnot. So
yeah,
if something's happening behind the scenes, it probably is happening without anybody knowing about it at this
yeah,
point. So
yeah. And also, sorry, this is a really important point.
yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot of hunters in Tanzania who are embarrassed. They are so fed up with the situation. Um, but it seems that they're unable to open their mouths, and hopefully that's going to change soon. But there's a lot of hunters who really object to what's happening.
Well, again, hopefully a roundtable kind of situation occurs in
Yeah,
which
yeah,
everyone can come
yeah,
together
yeah,
and say, okay, again, no reservations, no hard feelings. We have to
yeah,
talk about this, and everyone needs to have their
yeah,
voice heard.
yeah.
Richard, it's been an honor, my
Great.
friend.
Well,
Really
look,
good.
you said when you were coming out in July or something. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, come by.
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love
Are
to.
you in Kenya or Tanzania or where?
In Tanzania. I'll
Okay,
have to
well, we're
figure
not
out
on the border.
if there's a way to
We're very
cross the
close.
border from where we are. We'll come across and say hello.
We're a couple of hours.
Do
Easy.
I need to bring you anything from the States? Chocolates.
Um, no. Bottle of gin.
Gin. Okay, I got you. I'll find a great bottle of gin for you. No problem, sir.
Okay,
All right,
great.
thank you.
Look forward to meeting you.